Welcome back, everyone. I am the Depressed Eeyore, and this is Middara. So, since we hit Restore, I'm going to go ahead and hit Restore here, and I'll reset the deck completely. And I'll just hit Mundane for now, just in case. I'm pretty sure we're going to have Mundane still. Only other things, off-screen I increased the experience by 1, because we did get 1 experience for the previous encounter. So everyone's at 5, which means everyone can afford a level 2 Discipline at this point. I've kind of changed my mind on some of the builds, but we'll deal with that when that comes. So, we did Getting Cocky. It's going to lead to a strange pedestal next, so we're going to go ahead and read that. And that there is Hografar. So, Nightingale picked her way through the hall, careful not to make a sound. A pair of massive double doors blocked the way, made of wood so old it was more like stone. She can hear screaming coming from inside. Good thing you're being so loud. It might have been hard to find you. Nightingale was certain it was the thief. Who else would be down in the vaults? She peeked through the partly open double doors, leaning around the edge so she wouldn't alert the thief to her presence. Nightingale froze, staring through the doors in utter horror. She fought back the urge to scream, which turned halfway into a gag as she stared at the abomination that filled the center of the room. It looked like a head 30 feet tall with skin rotting and pale. Strands of matted, oily hair clung to its clammy flesh, and grasping limbs sprouted at random. So yeah, that is what she sees. The room was mostly empty, except for a pedestal that the monster seemed to be protecting. I have the right of salvage. The man stood with his back to her, separating her from the monster. He sounded far more confident than she would have been. You can't stop me. The creature laughed, throwing back a jaw that unhinged open to reveal more appendages. Every pale digit had become a row of glittering teeth. It wasn't laughter as ever Nightingale had known it before. It was like the last breath of the dying, shifted octaves lower and louder. I am Hografar, Lord of the Vaults. I have right to every treasure. Not this one, the thief said, stepping forward. It belongs to another. I will return it. Curiosity fought against her fear, and Nightingale moved closer to get a better look at what the thief was trying to steal. The pedestal didn't have priceless jewelry or some powerful enchantment, just a shard of broken rock glowing faintly. You have no use for this artifact, the thief yelled. Let me pass, and my master will reward you. The creature Hografar furrowed its obscene brow as if contemplating the offer. Nightingale moved closer, crouching low in the dark, so dark that she didn't see the stone until her foot struck it, sending it tumbling across the room. Hografar turned slightly, its single gigantic eye fixing on her. Her heart seized in her chest as the monster's apparent amusement turned to anger. Coward! You couldn't face me alone. This thief is less than a worm. It raised one of its massive limbs, swinging towards the thief. Get back! Nightingale's shout came too late. Blood sprayed through the air with an audible gurgle as Hografar tore across the man, gutting him in a spray of gore. Then he fell. No! Before she knew what was happening, she was sprinting towards the fallen thief. Get away from him! It wasn't just her. She heard Rook and Zeke charging down the hall, and Remy not far behind. They were helping, too. The monster swept aside their blows with ease. Their attacks slid like water from its hide without effect. Rook went slamming backward as a massive finger knocked the air from his lungs. Remy and Zeke weren't far behind, each sent flying with contempt. Nightingale charged, leaping with her weapon outstretched. Hografar caught her in mid-air with a swipe, tossing her backwards with ease. She was only dimly aware of striking the ground. Her weapon was sent spinning out of her grip as she slid to a stop. Behind her, the sound of cruel laughter echoed through the chamber. Nightingale didn't lie still for long. She felt her tail twitch, her limbs spasming one at a time as she regained control. Gurgling breaths came from somewhere so close she could almost feel the heat. Nightingale fought the pain, sitting up. The world was still spinning, but it was clear enough to see what happened. The monstrous Hografar had knocked her towards the injured thief. There was more blood than Nightingale had ever seen. It pooled on the ground around the thief, along with stringy gray flesh she realized must be his guts. For a moment, time stood still as she tried to process the image. She crawled weakly forward along the ground, reaching for the thief. I'm coming, she squeaked, her voice coming out in a slur. She clawed her way through the grime, fumbling through her gear with one shaking hand. Damn you! Get away from me! He coughed, blood pouring from his lips as he shoved her. Nightingale ignored him. The man was obviously in shock. He didn't know what he was saying. There was no chance she would listen. I'll stop the bleeding, or something. She searched desperately for the source of the blood pooling from his wound. She pushed, but couldn't manage enough pressure to do anything but cover her hands in deep red blood. The man's skin was pale, his insides open and exposed. Every second brought another pulse of fluid, some splattering on her bare skin. Get away! The man's breathing was slowing to a dull rattle. He pushed one of her legs, but the gesture was as futile as her attempt to stem the blood. I'll help you, she insisted again, leaning closer. There was probably healing magic for a wound this terrible, magic that someone who'd actually earned a spot in the demiurge would know. Maluma. The word came out in a hoarse rattle, bubbles forming in the thief's mouth as he gasped. He suddenly shook one last time, then finally fell still. Nightingale watched him die. She didn't notice that her friends were still stunned from their blows. She didn't think about the horrible monster behind her. Nothing made sense. Then something started to hiss and bubble. The corpse wasn't still. Something darker than blood was leaking from his face. Nightingale pushed away from him, blood still coating her arms and soaking into her clothes. No, it wasn't leaking. It was clawing its way out. It surged from behind his eyes, out his ears, and through the gaping hole in his chest. The mass of black solidified in the air above the corpse. It had dozens of eyes, no two alike in size or shape. They seemed to move freely, pointing directly at objects instead of pivoting to face them. Soon all of them were pointing at her. Nightingale screamed. She put her arms up, but it didn't hinder the ooze. Well, that's what's going on. It lashed onto her face like the malicious pseudopod of an amoeba. Fierce cold boiled at her skin where it touched, so cold it burned. Her scream choked in her throat as the monster pried her jaws open wider, filling her mouth. The seeping tar sucked into her eyes. She could feel the pressure of it pushing into her skull. The pain was overwhelming, screaming throughout her body. The darkness consumed her vision and her mind until her consciousness faded. Rook moaned. Despite the pain making every movement stiff, he knew he had to act. Hogrifar was still here, and he could easily kill him. He had to get up. He had to help his friends. He rose, grunting. In the darkness, his surroundings seemed to blur, yet one shape formed before the others. It was Hogrifar, looming in the murky shadows. Far worse, it was holding Nightingale in the air by one of her horns. Rook couldn't speak, instead fumbling for his weapon. He didn't dare do anything sudden, lest he startle the monster into killing his friend. Hogrifar held Nightingale very near between two grotesque fingers, expecting her closely. Where did you go? Acquired a new host? Perhaps trying to hide inside of another body? It was searching Nightingale's face with a massive eye. Rook tensed, ready for a vain attempt at an attack. After a few seconds, the monster started laughing again, and Nightingale shook vigorously in its grasp. Damn fool. Damned fool, Hogrifar called, voice so loud that the ground seemed to shake. She's just saved me from the parasite. It almost looked like the monster was smiling. Rook had no time for rational thought. He charged, lifting a massive weapon in both hands. Hogrifar didn't see him coming, nor did it turn towards the sound of Rook's pounding steps. Rook struck as hard as he could, aiming straight at for the joint of one of the creature's fingers. The half-rotten flesh parted, spraying foul-smelling slime. Hogrifar roared, it's getting louder and louder. Nightingale landed with a sick-sounding thump at Rook's feet. He didn't slow as he scooped her into his arms, turning towards the smallest door in the room. Follow me, Rook bellowed, gesturing for Zeke and Remy. Despite their recent beating, the two were both on their feet and weren't far behind him. They ran for their lives. Rook couldn't have said where he went. At each fork and junction, he picked a direction at random. So long as the way through looked clear, the ground shook behind them, and Hogrifar's terrible screeching still sounded in his ears. Rook ran until his guts started to ache, oblivious to anything but the placement of his feet and Nightingale in his arms. The sound of pursuit faded to a distant echo, and only then could they stop. Rook dropped to his knees, lowering Nightingale to the ground in front of him. Zeke was the first to speak, his voice so casual it sounded forced. Did either of you catch the way we came? I know. Remy dropped to the ground beside Rook, nudging at Nightingale's cheek with one hand. She whimpered like an injured animal, her eyes opened. What happened? Are you all right? Rook asked. Are you kidding? Nightingale shook her head once. What the hell was on that pedestal? I think that Thief might have had the plague or something. Did you guys see the thing? Rook frowned. I don't know what you're talking about, Nightingale. That was blood, and maybe intestines. Hografar disemboweled him. Nightingale pulled herself into a sitting position. Oh God, I'm not sure. I thought I saw, but I couldn't have. I think I just hit my head. We have bigger problems right now. Zeke gestured around the little room. I don't have a goddamn clue where we are. The vaults. We get it, Remy said flatly. Thousands and thousands of rooms, and at least one of them has a gigantic monster that's probably looking for us. Zeke offered Nightingale's hand and helped her stand. She swayed on her feet, but only a little. You got any smart ideas, Rook? Rook nodded. I've got one idea, but you guys have to be cool about it. Nobody freak out. Nobody freak out? Nightingale repeated, her voice strained and shaking. Are you serious, Rook? We just met some kind of god of the vaults. I'm not sure you can scare us. Still. Rook reached up, removing the amulet hanging around his neck. Sorry? He didn't say it so much as he thought it, calling out through the strange amulet with focused will, though this artifact was a forbidden place, now within reach. Yes, Rook. The answering voice came almost instantly. You sound upset. I am, Rook said to the empty air all around him. Can you manifest here? The reply came with a little reproach. There are 3 others with you. I thought I told you my kind was forbidden in your world. Both of us would be in great danger if your kind learned of our friendship. Rook glanced once at each of his friends in turn, each so badly beaten down that they were barely conscious. I trust them, Siri. We need your help. As you wish. Light began to glow from the amulet, a magenta that overwhelmed the gloom. Rook was numb to the wonder by now, though he could at least feel a little satisfaction at the amazement on his friends' faces. That light solidified, greenish and humanoid, with a body of radiant energy that blurred at the edges. Her hair was electric blue and waved in a wind he couldn't feel. Whoa. Zeke's lighter fell to the ground with a faint thump. Hi. Suri bounced on nothing, though she never got more than a few feet from Rook. The amulet continued to glow, evidence of their connection. Everybody, this is Suri. It's very important you never mention her to anyone. The spirit darted a little nearer to each one as Rook introduced them, staring openly. How did... Zeke began. Rook cut Zeke off with a gesture. Later. He turned, fixing his eyes on the glowing spirit. Suri, we're lost down here. Can you help us find the way out? Suri vanished. Did she just leave us? Remy asked, nervous. That's a lot of build-up for someone that won't help. Rook shook his head. Amulet is still glowing. She wandered off. Before he could explain, Suri reappeared in a flash of light. I found the way. A glowing trail formed, leading out an open door. Best get moving. Continue to a way out, page 32, which is all the way in the other direction. Boop, 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 boop. Alright, a way out. Your friends are good at this. Suri glided along in front of Rook as they made their way through the ruined halls. It seemed the closer they were to the surface, the more had crumbled away, eaten by time and air. Yeah, Rook still had a weapon within reach, if he needed it. So far, they managed to avoid anything that might try to stop them from leaving the vaults. In fact, they saw nothing more dangerous than occasional vermin. It seemed the lesser creatures of the upper vault had learned to stay away, probably due to Hografar's presence. Thanks for the directions. We'll have to bring a map next time, Remy said. Maybe we can pick somewhere safer. We could help innkeepers deal with the rats in their basements. Inquiry. Siri didn't meet Remy's eyes so much as she watched her wings. Do the mortals of this realm routinely invoke the help of skilled professionals to get them out of the minor problems they could have solved on their own? No, Zeke grunted. On Earth they did. People on Middara usually have more sense. Zeke left a trail of smoke behind him. Rook wondered where this new cigarette had come from, but took it as a good sign. They were recovering from their experience, except maybe Nightingale. Her skin was strangely pale, and she took every spare moment to rest that she could. Suri slowed a little as she considered Zeke's words, then shrugged. It was one of the first gestures she learned to imitate, though Rook still wasn't sure if it meant the same thing to her. This is the way out. The security bar on the other side is unlocked, so you should be able to open it. She gestured at a strange section of wall, where intricate metal clamps anchored to a round metal door. There had been words written here once, but Rook couldn't make them out anymore. They pushed together, and the resting doors squeaked slowly opened, letting them out onto the ground surrounding the white spires. Zeke led the group towards his family's manor, and nearly 20 minutes later they had arrived at the Zhang house, a large white building Zeke called home. Continue to Dark Passenger, page 40. Boop, 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 boop. That's down here. Nightingale collapsed onto the ground, pressing her face against it for a few seconds. She was fairly certain she'd never been happier to be away from adventure in her life. We made it. Thank God. She let out an exhausted sigh. Behind her, Suri's voice was barely a whisper. What is this place? I sense active spells upon the stones. Zeke locked the door behind them with a resounding click. My family dorms us here while we're attending the institute. I've been told it was already built into the foundation of the rock when this land was claimed. It's supposed to have enchantments to keep us safe. I believe it does. Suri floated gently past Nightingale, looking between each of Rook's friends. It was very nice to meet you all. Please do not share anything about our experiences tonight, or we will all die violently. Goodbye. There was a faint pop and a flash of purple light. Rook's amulet stopped glowing. Sorry about that. Suri is a little oblivious to courtesy. Rook offered a hand to Nightingale. Are you all right? Yeah. Nightingale took the offered hand, rising again. It was more than a little strain on her body, but she managed not to sway. I think I just need some rest. We should visit the castle first, Rook said, concerned. Your father has excellent doctors after what happened. Nothing happened. Nightingale yelled, her tail snapping behind her. Really? Didn't you say you saw something come out of the thief? Rook looked from Remy to Zeke. Did either of you see that? Nope. Zeke looked down, frowning. After that thing knocked me around, my memory gets fuzzy for a bit. Remy nodded. My dumb wings were in the way. I didn't get up again until I heard her scream. Nightingale could remember the amorphous shape sprouting towards her after she tried to save the thief. She shivered, glancing down at the ruin of her dress. It was brown and crusty with dirt and dried blood. She tried to push the image up from her mind. That thing, it called itself Hografar, right? It must have hit me first, that's all. She shook her head. How about we don't go anywhere near my father tonight? He's the reason I went into the vault in the first place. Rook sighed. I'm not sure where else we would go. You could crash here, Zeke gestured at the living room with a cigarette. We've got this whole mansion and everything. Might as well use a few of the extra rooms. You too, Remy. It's too late to make a trip back to the Institute now. Perfect. Nightingale nodded, forcing more enthusiasm into the response than she felt. The next hour passed in a blur to Nightingale. She ducked away first to wash off all the blood and change into clean clothes. After that, she ate some leftover soup as Zeke prepared a few spare rooms for their use. Nightingale dreamed of the white vaults where the floor stretched away to an endless darkness, and an alien monstrosity of writhing limbs guarded something she wanted. Hografar was there, its proportions even more hideous than she remembered. The shadows of its desperate parts writhed, all reaching for her. Nightingale watched herself try in vain to save the thief, watched him die before her eyes. Something even worse than the freakish Hografar poured from the corpse and latched onto her face, its body a hideous mass of swirling eyes and mouths and teeth. Eventually, she saw herself collapse, overwhelmed by the agony she remembered. Her dream self's eyes opened, staring at her. There was something dark behind them, an alien intelligence, anathema to life as she knew it. Nightingale woke abruptly, shooting upright in the gigantic four-poster bed. The early light of dawn streamed in from one window, filling the room with its dull glow. Something reached for her shoulder, blocking out the light. Nightingale jerked violently away, twisting it off the bed and landing with a pained thump on the floor. She came back up a second later, panting with her weapon in hand. There was nothing there. Nightingale took a deep breath to calm herself. She set her weapon down finally, then made her way downstairs. The kitchen was busy, though not with servants or staff. Instead, she was more than a little surprised to see Remy, Rook, and Zeke already waiting. Hey, Knight. Zeke raised a spatula in mock salute. Feeling better? Yeah, Nightingale lied, looking around at the mess. Eggs and flour everywhere, along with other stains she couldn't easily identify. Did something blow up? Yes. No. Remy and Rook answered at exactly the same time, both looking abashed. Rook glared once at Remy before continuing. We had some disagreement about whether animism could be used to make an omelet. Remy wiped a sheen of slime away from her face with a cloth and tossed it onto the counter beside her. Turns out, it wasn't a good idea. Zeke scooped a fresh and completely inanimate omelet out of a pan and onto a waiting plate. After yesterday, we weren't going to get you until everything was ready. Did the explosion wake you? Nah. She helped straighten things up, then the four of them sat down to eat. It was only after she had eaten her portion and the scraps left over from everyone else that Nightingale realized just how hungry she'd been. As they were finishing up, someone knocked at the door, and Zeke left to deal with it. He returned a moment later with a familiar figure just behind him. Khufu! Nightingale was up in an instant, bouncing with energy. She loped over for a friendly hug. What are you doing here? Khufu pried her off. Your father sent me. You're urgently needed at the castle. He looked between them. Zeke, you've been called before as well. Zeke and Nightingale exchanged a worried look. Khufu ignored their exchange. You're the new knight, right? Khufu had to look up a little to meet Rook's eyes. You too. Oh, you guys are so screwed. I bet they found out what happened last night. Khufu turned, facing Remy with obvious confusion. What do you mean? What happened? Remy looked away, one of her wings twitching. Never mind. I'm not royalty, and I'm not Nightingale's knight. I'm sure your family don't want me there. Nightingale darted over to her. I don't care. You can come too. Screw that what Balthazar wants. Okay. It was hard to tell if Remy looked nervous or relieved. It's not like I have anywhere else to go, now that we've graduated and all. The sooner we leave, the better. Khufu glanced back at the hallway he came from. King Balthazar didn't say what this was about. He only said I had to fly here as fast as I could. I've got a pretty good idea, Nightingale groaned, running one hand through her unruly hair, so much for having enough time to get ready. Let's just go. Waiting for him to get angry it isn't going to make it better. Continue to Arson Castle, page 42, which is here. Give me a moment. Alright. Arson Castle was a lone monolith in the center of the city's mysterious lake. Reaching it required they cross an imposing bridge with ugly stone gargoyles watching their every step. As they walked across the imposing bridge, the usual flood of official business in both directions had somehow changed to a faint trickle. Remy stared up at the castle as they neared it, awestruck by the alien construction in the full light of day. She looked over at Rook, who seemed just as awestruck as she felt. I guess gonna have to get used to coming here, Rook muttered. Remy followed his eyes and found herself suddenly shivering. There was something off about the castle, something she hadn't noticed before. Maybe it was the proportions. Most of the windows looked too large from this distance. The front doors might be massive and intimidating, but they were also directly in proportion with everything else. As they continued to cross the bridge, she refused to look over the side into the swirling water far below. Something was swimming down there, always circling, always waiting. You and me both. Nightingale looked uncomfortable. You can tell it wasn't built by humans. Okay, that's Yolel. It was originally a fortress, not a castle, Rook nodded. It is in the middle of a lake. I bet tearing it apart and rebuilding it was pretty expensive, Zeke said, flicking the charred butt of a cigarette over the edge of the bridge and down into the moat. Let me do the talking, Nightingale said, her voice flat. What we got into was my fault. You tried to stop me, Rook, and the rest of you were against it. As long as Balthazar knows I'm completely responsible, you guys shouldn't get in trouble. If you say so, Rook said noncommittally. They moved quickly up to the doors where a pair of armed soldiers waited. Servants ushered them into the throne room, not even complaining about their companions. The king and queen sat on their thrones, backs straight and expressions mask-like. Nightingale's brother and sister were there, along with Zeke's uncle Yun and his mother Ada. With the way he behaved last night, Remy never would have thought Yun would be at a royal gathering. How considerate of my little sister to grace us with her presence, Yul muttered, just loud enough for them to hear as they approached the thrones. We've only been waiting, an hour? Balthazar rose, clearing his throat. Welcome back, daughter. He nodded respectfully to Zeke. I'm relieved you made it also. This information concerns your family as well as ours. The king hardly seemed to see Rook standing there, though at least there was nothing judgmental in Balthazar's expression. For Remy, there was only confusion and a little annoyance on his face. Nightingale seemed to have noticed too, because she reached back, resting one arm on Remy's shoulder. Remy could see Nightingale's body tense under her father's gaze. Balthazar looked as though he were going to say something about Remy's presence, then sighed and sat back down. There is little time. Rulers and guardians of Alenia, Kezia, and I should already be on the road. We cannot waste time with the formalities I would prefer. Your memorial hunt. I could have never forget the day. Ida supplied, voice strained. Balthazar bowed. I will bring the most glorious trophy yet in Lo's memory, Lady Ida. She sighed. I'm sure he'd be flattered. Unfortunately, the Cedar's hunt has come at an inopportune time, Balthazar continued, gesturing slightly towards his wife. The queen was every bit Balthazar's match for confidence, her voice clear and loud in a mostly empty throne room. You were all aware of the growing tension between Alenia and our nearest neighbor, the Empire of Brahma. Not really, Nightingale interrupted. I know they've hated us since Alenia was founded, but I don't know why. Or why it always seems to be getting worse. And here's a picture of Ida. Kezia turned towards Nightingale. The details would take time we don't have to explain. Suffice it to say that Brahma has always claimed Alenia as its territory, but never used it. When we declared our independence, they failed to recognize us as a state. Yoel spoke from his chair. Brahma is considerably larger and more powerful than Alenia. The best intelligence we have suggests their soldiers outnumber ours 10 to 1. They have their own version of demiurge, too, a cabal of sorcerers and mercenaries called the Grim Deacons. The initiation rites alone would leave you That's enough, Kezia interrupted. The peace envoy will be arriving within the month. Yoel will conduct the negotiations and attempt to alleviate tensions before they escalate. Yoel? Edith Zhang's voice was matter-of-fact. Her arms folded. Take this as no slight to your son, but Yoel is incapable of handling such delicate matters. He's hot-headed. Kezia glared sidelong at her. I have confidence in my son's abilities. His work delegating peace in Fair Edge has been commendable. You mean Shayless's work in Fair Edge, Edith said, glancing sideways towards Nightingale's sister. Shayless stood. Yoel and Nalia have proven themselves more than capable of diplomacy. If it wasn't for them, I might be on the gallows in Fair Edge right now. Speaking of Nalia, where is she? Ida tapped her fingers rhythmically on the chair she sat in. My wife has left the Fair Edge. The Wolfric family has requested her presence as a formality. We're playing along, Yoel said calmly. Ida relaxed a little. Kezia, it should be you who delegates the peace envoy. You could sell a king his own castle. What could you be doing that's more important? I must go west, Kezia said flatly. She offered no explanation. Remy's friends looked as confused as she felt. Remy looked between the two noble ladies, trying to read whatever silent conversation had passed between them. We don't have high hopes for the negotiations, Kezia said. Brahma knows they have us outmatched. We're afraid they may have come to offer terms we can't accept. I will not be attending the negotiations because I will be visiting some of our closest allies to secure military aid against the invasion we believe may be inevitable. Kezia will travel west to her parents' house in the far west. The Lucero family will aid us if the worst were to transpire, Balthazar said. I expect the rest of my family to be in attendance when the Brahmarian delegation arrives. Balthazar turned, glancing to the little cluster of chairs the Zhang's family had put together. And as many of yours as can be available, Lady Ida. My son has Alenia's best interest at heart, but lacks the wisdom that comes of experience. Balthazar rose to his feet again, resting one hand on the hilt of his sword at his waist. Should Yoel be killed, the succession will pass to Salus and then to you, Nightingale. May there be no need. Why am I here? Nightingale asked. We keep our business private, Balthazar answered. But you've graduated, and you're part of the family now. Did you think politics was collecting taxes and attending balls? We fought for our kingdom, and we'll be fighting to keep it. Nightingale watched as the retinue of soldiers followed closely behind her parents as they left the room. A few minutes later, they watched from a balcony as King Balthazar depart in an extravagant carriage. Zeke was smoking again, though he looked a little uneasy. Sometimes I wonder if going through the advancement made all of us lose our minds. Nobody realizes because we're all just as crazy. He looked away. Lo was my dad, but if it were me, I'd still put the memorial hunt on hold if it seemed like my kingdom was going to be invaded, you know? Must be an important hunt, Rook muttered. I'm not going to assume they don't know what they're doing. I'd guess there is more to it. I don't care what nefarious things my dad does on his lame hunt. I don't want to think about politics or war or any of that. We need to be more positive, Nightingale waved at the retreating carriage. Zeke raised an eyebrow. More positive? Like how if everyone dies, you become queen? What? Nightingale put a hand on her hip. No, stupid. I mean, that my dad is gone. She still looked pale, yet some of her original energy seemed to be bubbling back. We graduated yesterday. We're citizens. There's a whole world full of adventure out there, and the only one who might stop us is riding off in that carriage. Zeke nodded. I've meant to get out into Alinea proper. What's the point of being able to leave the Institute if we spend all of our time at home? My family left me some cash as a graduation present. Mine did too. Nightingale seemed to be getting more excited by the moment. I bet if we pulled it, we could have enough for new gear for all of us. Alinea has always been a hub for adventurers. I bet we'll find some great stuff. Nightingale and Zeke pulled out small pouches and began counting how much gold they had. Reward. The party gains the following bonus depending on how much experience the adventurers have earned, including experience they've spent. 4 experience gets... So essentially, if you... a lot of the encounters, the defeat generally means you get no experience, but you still continue. Because defeat doesn't necessarily mean a game over. So if you kind of just defeated your way through progress, then the game's like, all right, well, you're doing pretty horribly, so here's some extra gold to hopefully get you some, more gear, more consumables to use. We right now have, counting the experience we spent, it takes 3 experience to get the first level 1 discipline. Everyone has a level 1 discipline, and everyone has 5 experience. So that's a total of 8 experience. So, that means we have 7+ experience, which means we get the least amount of gold, because we're doing just fine. So we get 10 gold. So amongst the 4 of them, they had 10 gold. So 131. And if you notice I'm pausing a lot, it's because there's a cat that is constantly jumping on the table right now. Alright. Nightingale's excitement was infectious. Even Rook's mind started turning. She seemed rather determined to get herself into danger on a regular basis. Some new gear might be just what he needed to be a better knight. Could be fun, Rook agreed. And when we're done? Nightingale hardly even seemed to hear him. We'll have everything we need to finish exploring the vaults. They all stared. It took a moment to realize what she was suggesting. Are you sure that's a good idea? I mean, Zeke said through a billow of smoke, we got the whole monster mash after us last time. Hografar hadn't forgotten about us. Rook cleared his throat. I admit, I was curious last time, but we've seen it now. It's out of our league. Psh! Nightingale waved a dismissive hand. If we were just unprepared. We know Hografar is down there. We can be much more careful. I haven't been able to stop thinking about what was on that pedestal. Whatever it was has to be epic. I mean, some real purple color loot. And apparently Nightingale has played MMOs. I'm down, Remy squeaked. I mean, we'll have better gear, and it's not like we couldn't get away from Hografar last time. Yeah, Nightingale embraced Remy, wrapping one arm around her. She gets it. Zeke extinguished his cigarette on the railing, flicking the butt over the side. It's a stupid idea, but I guess I'm down. Nightingale turned to Rook. You don't have to come. I know my father made you my knight, but I'm coming. Rook didn't wait for her to finish. We'll probably need Suri's help again to find our way around, and you wouldn't have her help without me there. That's more like it, Nightingale grinned, and Nightingale's grin returned. But first, let's go shopping. Continue to story round, City of Alinea, page 47. But first, here's some pictures of Alinea. Tip, buying the right gear. Anytime players are instructed to go to a story round, they go through all the steps listed on the story round. During the story rounds, players can buy new items, spend experience to learn new disciplines, and embark on side quests. Each time players initiate a story round for the first time, a new unique item will be up for sale. So if you can't afford it now, you can always come back later when you return with more gold from a side quest. Monsters in Middara can be difficult to kill. For this reason, we recommend prioritizing new weapons over other gear in most cases. If players cannot afford new weapons, it's recommended to embark on a side quest to earn the gold required to purchase new weapons before continuing the main quest. So here we are. This is our first official story round. So, as mentioned, we have Shop and Train, which is you can spend gold and learn disciplines. It's just like before. The only difference now is since this is an official story round, we actually get the one random mundane unique item. So what we're going to do, mundane unique items are right here. I'm going to hit shuffle once and pull it out. Alright, so we have Bearer of Justice. It costs 50 gold. It's a longbow, just like the weapon that Nightingale has right now. It's white and orange die for the attack, 6 range, 2-handed. And it has the same benefits of other longbows, where if you don't move, you get +1 to the attack roll. And then if you get that benefit, you can't move. Or you can't take a move action, rather. And then attacks made against an opponent that dealt damage to an ally since the end of your last turn adds an additional 2 physical damage. So if she targets someone that's done damage, it automatically gets +2 to physical. And then it has the ability to be exhausted, and when an opponent within sphere of influence deals 4 or more damage to an ally, that opponent is afflicted with wilt. So I believe we have not encountered wilt on this recording. Usually I pick up, I mentioned I usually pick up a ability called Euthanasia. Euthanasia does tons of damage, it does 6 damage, and it can inflict wilt. And the main benefit, that's usually one of the main benefits of it, because wilt, what it does is attacks made against you add +2 irreversible damage and ignores resistances. We haven't really encountered anything that has resistance, but +2 irreducible damage pretty much means anything that we hit that has wilted will do at least 2 damage to, which can be helpful against really heavily armored targets like Earthloas. The only thing that's a bit iffy about it is, of course, it has to be within sphere of influence, and as you probably noticed with the bow, I usually try to stay as far back as possible. The other thing about the Bearer of Justice is its symbols. So, just in comparison, Nightingale's longbow, she gets +2 physical damage for every 2 shields, +1 physical for every star, and she can get a follow-up move of 1 space. This thing doesn't have the follow-up move. It still has the +1 physical damage for stars, but instead of having 2 shields for every 2 damage, it's every 5 shields gives her +6 damage. So for this weapon, you generally want to always use Empower, because with a white and an orange die, it's pretty much impossible to get 5 shields with a white and an orange die. If you look at the dice here, there's a white here. At the highest amount you can get is 2, and the highest amount you can get here is 1 shield. So at most you can get 3. So even with like something that gives you an additional shield, like Courage, it would not be enough to trigger the effect. But if you can trigger this effect, your damage will just skyrocket. In my previous playthroughs, my personal one and my scrapped playthrough of this, I usually got Bearer of Justice as a drop. So this is the first time I've had it in the shop. So it's a little bit different. I still might pick it up. The only thing I'm going to kind of take a look at is what the future bows look like. I believe our future bow is this one. Ball combine, hindering train, get +1 defense. And it goes up to teal dice, which is a little bit better overall. Yeah, I might go ahead and go Bearer of Justice and then not worry about getting the Assassin's Longbow. I think that might be something we're doing. And something to note about shops, when they pull out a unique item, that unique item stays in that shop pretty much the entire time until you move to the next story round. So that means this Bearer of Justice is no longer in the loot pool. So if we want it, we need to buy it pretty much right now. And if we can't afford it, anytime we do like a side quest, we come back to this spot here where we can shop and train. So if we can't afford it, we can always do a side quest and come back and buy it. We have enough money to buy it, but there's definitely some things I want to look at first. So a few things. I want to do, one thing is we have 5 experience to spend. So let's go ahead and grab the things I definitely am going to use. I'm going to use summoning, because summoning is fun. So summoning is the level 2 assemblage ability, and it costs 5 experience. And the only people that can learn, this is probably the only thing that goes off a tier system, where you have to buy a level 1 of that type of discipline before you can buy a level 2. So the only people that can buy summoning right now is Zeke and Remy. And I want it on Remy because I'm building her for summoning. So summoning assemblage level 2. Flip effect, summon a loyal Esper within your SOI. The Esper's level may not exceed your highest level assemblage discipline. So right now it's level 2. Then gain summon tokens equal to your highest level assemblage discipline. So with this, we get 2 summon tokens, which are these. So summon tokens, you discard them to make your loyal Esper you control use an ability or an action for free. So this is kind of her way of commanding her summon to do something that's during her turn, because summons actually have their own turns and their own initiatives. Also, something to note: it's a flip effect, which means it doesn't refresh until the story tells us we refresh. So, like for example, that previous thing we just been doing, we didn't get a refresh until the very end. So whatever summoning we do, that's pretty much going to be the only summoning we get for the entire adventure. Same thing for these summon tokens. Once they're used, they're going to be gone until I get a refresh. So that's something you gotta be careful about. Summons are really useful, but if you lose them, then your discipline's pretty much a dead skill. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these. So in here, in the command AI tiles, it has all the summons and all the conduit summons. So what we want are just the summons right now. We can only summon up to level 2. If we take a look at some of these, in the top right corner under Loyal Esper, it shows what level these are. So Agaris here is level 4. Femke and DM are level 3. Zulfikar is level 1, so we can grab him. And then Elifie is level 2, and we can grab her as well. So we got these 2. So this is our first time dealing with a command card. So they function very similar to characters. They get stamina on their turn, and then they can spend them on these various effects. So we'll start with Zulfikar first. I have yet to actually try this guy in combat. In the original way summoning kind of worked, you generally had kind of no... I think there might have been a few reasons to use Zulfikar, but unfortunately, I just find Elifie far more useful overall. But I'm going to go ahead and go through this. So these guys actually have their own stats. So Zulfikar here has 2 presence, 6 lore, 4 agility, 3 perception, and 3 strength. You might notice there's these little asterisks for their health, defense, and combat dice, their conviction, and casting. Essentially, they have the same values as the summoner. So for example, Remy has 2 whites for her combat dice, which means both these characters actually have white dice for their combat dice. She only has 2 purples for conviction and casting dice of purple, so that means they have purples for those. Her hit points is equal to they match her hit points. So right now she has 20 HP, which means these will have 20 HP. So this is part of the reason why I've been bulking up on HP, because it actually helps these summons stay alive. There's also another reason, which is because of Elifie, but I'll talk more about that later. Same thing for defense, it's just equal. It specifically states it copies the stats of the card, the character card that summoned it, and whatever benefits they get from certain items. So for defense, it goes based off the base defense plus anything they get from their defensive core, or from their core. For health, it's anything on their card and then anything on their items or disciplines. And for weapons, casting die, and conviction, it's literally equal to what they have, plus their gear. So, for example, if you happen to be using something like a Warhammer, is that what's it called? Sorry, not a Warhammer, a Sledgehammer, which has Empower on the combat dice, they would get Empower on all their swings as well. So, with all that said and done, the only thing that's generally unique to them is their armor and their movement. Zulfikar has 4 movement, which is another reason why I usually don't summon him, is because he's rather slow, and I don't like using slow people. But he has a lot of good abilities. Phantasmal Sword is his passive. He has Flight, Elusive, and Resistance Physical damage. The first time each turn Zulfikar is attacked, he gets Dodge with a +1 shield. If this dodge is successful, Zulfikar may immediately end all actions and abilities, which just immediately shuts down the opponent. Then the Spirit Blade moves 3 spaces and then makes another attack. So anything that attacks it, he essentially stops that person and then immediately moves around and counterattacks. Resistance Physical means any physical damage that's dealt to him does only half, rounded up. Elusive means it can move without provoking break attacks, and Flight, we already know how Flight works. So it's doing pretty good. And the reason why it has Flight and Elusive is simply because if there's ever a situation where Flight is not available, Elusive will still apply. It has some zero-cost abilities. It has True Devotion. All adjacent figures to Zulfikar are dealt 4 magic damage. Then the figure that spawns Zulfikar heals equal to the total damage dealt, and then Zulfikar is defeated. So essentially it can just self-destruct. That can help restore Remy as well. 4 magic damage AoE is pretty good, but it does kill the summon. There's a zero-cost Promise, which is exhausted. When making an attack, Zulfikar gains +X to the attack roll, where X equals the amount of times Zulfikar attacks the target this turn. He has a regular attack, which is just his standard 2-cost attack. And then he has a special attack, which is Onslaught, which costs 3, and he makes an attack. And essentially, it's just like with Cave Sickles, where it gets additional follow-ups. Of course, the follow-ups only apply if you actually hit. They also have their own symbols. Every shield gives +1 physical damage, and every Starburst gives +2 physical damage. Like I mentioned before, I never use Zulfikar, ever. But I'll still hold on to the card just in case. I'll probably find a place to put it somewhere. Now, the one I tend to use is Elifie. Elifie has 3 presence, 2 lore, 5 agility, 6 perception, and 2 strength. She has 6 movement, which is just like everyone else, so she can keep up. Her symbols are Books and Starburst. The Books give +1 magic damage, and the Stars give +2 magic damage, so that means that bypasses armor. Her passive is Bag Full of Organs. Oh, I guess one thing to mention, Zulfikar is a Spirit Blade, as far as the monster type, and Elifie is a Viscera Aramid. As you can see, there's a bag full of organs, made out of organs as well. So, Elifie is nimble, which means she gets a free. The first time she's attacked, she will dodge, and that dodge will have +1 shield. And then opponents with an SOI have -2 armor. This is important. -2 armor pretty much means that things like animates have 0 damage resistance at that point. Really, really helpful. And it can even make things like Earthflow is a little bit more vulnerable as well. The other thing she gets is essentially a once per turn free Gore Shot. Cast a spell 6, deal 2 magic damage. Elifie, just like with when Nightingale had Gore Shot, she can choose to take 2 damage and then deal magic damage equal to 2 times her summoner's highest level, Discipline. Since we just picked up a level 2 Discipline, that means she will do an extra 4 damage instead of an extra 2. So if she hits with Gore Shot, she can just take 2 damage to pretty much immediately kill something like a Cave Sickle, which is pretty useful. And then she has a lot of support abilities. Majority of them require exhaustion. So with 1 stamina and exhaustion, she can give someone with an SOI barrier. As mentioned before, barrier gives +1 armor. And the catch is she does damage to herself as a result. She'll take 1 damage. There's Gore Cleanse, which is very similar. It's you can remove an effect from a figure with an SOI, but it deals 2 damage to Elifie. This is pretty useful because besides right now, the only thing we have that removes effects is magic bombs, and being able to remove things like poison can be very, very important. And then for 2 stamina, which is not exhausted, you can invigorate, which is you can give someone a dodge token, and she'll take 1 damage as a result. So dodge tokens, essentially you just discard them, and they give you a free dodge. These are circles, so they do carry over until you get a refresh. This is pretty useful in some cases, especially if you have someone with Conduit, because Conduit's summons don't get the benefits of gear abilities, so you can't use things like Occult Shirt to dodge or or even things like the defensive core. So if you're using a conduit summon, you might want to go ahead and use Elifie's Invigorate and put dodge tokens on that person so they have other ways of dodging besides spending stamina. And then the final thing is just her standard attack, which is a Scalpel. So, like I said, overall very useful. Just from a pure debuff and support form. I mean, being able to put barriers up is really good. Gore Shot's just free magic damage, essentially. And then just that SOI ability of just debuffing armor is just super, super useful right now. Because animates are always a pain with all that armor. This is part of the reason why I want to get more and more hit points on my summoner this time around. Usually I don't go that high on HP, and that really hurts Elifie a lot, because a lot of her abilities rely on taking damage to actually do things. So I'll probably be using Elifie through most of this. I'm pretty familiar with using her. She's just super useful. Alright, so I kind of talked all about summoning, so let's go ahead and consider our other options. So obviously Remy's picking up summoning, which is going to bring her down to 0 experience. Something about spending experience cost, you might notice there's a little plus sign besides the number. If you ever buy another discipline of the same level, so for example, if I had chosen to pick up something like, I don't know, maybe I wanted to pick up Mend. If I wanted to pick up Mend on Remy, it would cost an additional 1 experience, because it's 3 plus every level 1 discipline that you have. So it would cost 4. So something to be aware of. So even if you're trying to just spread across like level 1 disciplines, it gradually gets more and more expensive. That being said, so I talked about Zeke. I was strongly considering doing Conduit Summon just to show it off. Conduit Summoning can be rather complicated. I'll talk just briefly about it. Essentially what Conduit Summoning does is, as you kill monsters, you will get their Conduit card, and you can essentially transform into those monsters. So those fancy abilities that you've been seeing some monsters do, you would have those abilities. So for example, you're about to... the neat thing about Conduit Summoning is you can use it at any time as long as you have the stamina to do it. So it's like, alright, I'm about to get hit by something that just empowered their attack. Or sorry, I'm about to be attacked by somebody that's about to empower their attack. And so all those symbols are about to bear down on me. Okay, I transform into a Water Loa. I now have Arcane. Those symbols don't do anything. Or it's like, alright, a bunch of little things are about to swarm me. I'll change into an Earth Loa and get 5 armor. It's like, alright, I need to go across some water. It's like, alright, I can either go Water Loa, Merkhound, or even Cave Sickle and be able to ignore terrain penalties. If I need to get somewhere really, really fast, I can become a Gavaden double move. It's just a lot of options. And then it's like, alright, I need to regenerate. I'll change into an Animate. It's really cool. It has a lot of interesting flexibility, but it is a little complicated because when you transform into a conduit creature, the only disciplines you can use is Conduit Summon. You can't use any of the other ones. So for example, if Zeke had Conduit Summon and he transformed, he wouldn't be able to use Banished Knowledge. He wouldn't be able to use any of his items. He wouldn't be able to use... you would not be able to use any of the effects that are on his weapons. So for example, he wouldn't be able to throw his axes or use dodge on his too many belts. The big detriment is the one where you can't use dodges. But you'll still get benefits like, the combat dice. You'll still get your defense bonus from the core. You'll still get your health, but you will not get your armor. It can be a little complicated. I made a lot mistakes with Conduit Summoning because I kept thinking I had dodges. Like I'll be like, all right, I'll just use my occult shirt and my too many belts and my core, and then I realized, oh, I actually can't use any of those, and the only way I can dodge is either with stamina or with dodge tokens. So it's an interesting thing, but I think my luck with Zeke with rolls has always been kind of wacky. And I think I know what I want Zeke to do. I really been liking him putting just haste on people. And so I think I want to embrace him having a lot of support abilities. I don't know if there's any level 2 support abilities on Assemblage that I really care about. There's Conduit Summoning. Fortune Telling. Once per encounter, you can just choose a single die result. That's pretty cool. Ruination. Swap places with an ally. That's cost of a spell. That's stuff for... Some of these are just buffs to summons. Yeah, so nothing really for that. And there's not really any other support things I want to mess with in level 1. So I was thinking actually of picking up, what's the spell called? Magic Armor. Now we do have Elify, but eventually I might be using other summons as we get stronger. Because if Remy gets to like tier 3 assemblage, she would actually get more access to other summons. So Magic Armor, it's a level 1 Sanctus ability. Exhaust, spend 1 stamina, ally gets barrier. And if you cast it on somebody other than yourself, it's free. I think I'm going to have Zeke just purely work on buffs, which will also help out Rook, because upping his armor will essentially increase Rook's defense and damage because he has Courage Stifle. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take Magic Armor. It's going to cost him 4 experience because he already has a level 1, so he's going to go down to 1 experience. So that's done. For Rook, I think I mentioned possibly giving him Mend, but I think I know what I want him to have. This is something I did on the scrapped playthrough, and that was giving him Aspect. But he originally I gave him Mend and then Aspect, and it really helps him out a lot. Aspect gives him +1 movement, and movement point cost is not increased by terrain or allies. So essentially he's now a super fast, muscly guy that's just going to slam you with his shield magic stuff. It's pretty powerful stuff. I'll take a quick look at level 2 Sanctus to see if there's anything that really stands out. Because they're still good abilities, it's just there's a lot of them. Proof of Divinity. So there's Proof of Divinity, which is an ally within SOI gains Courage. And the first time each round another ally with Courage deals damage, you get +1 stamina, which is pretty unique. We got Salvation. At the start of an encounter, pick a negative effect and place its token on this card for the duration of this encounter. You are immune to this effect. So it can be something like, I don't know, Darkness. But you have to pick at the start of the encounter, so it could be anything. We've been fighting a lot of animates, so an option you can pick is Darkness and become immune to Darkness. If you're fighting a lot of cave sickles, you can be like, I'm immune to poison. If there's things like Earth Loas, you can be like, alright, I'm immune to Paralyze. So a bunch of options there. There's Soul Clear, which is you can essentially remove an effect with an SOI. It's a bit expensive, but it is cheaper if you cast on other people. You can get some bonuses here. You can actually get Temporary Flight if you want to. Ascension tends to stack with things like Intervention here, which gets you those tokens. Which Intervention gives you the ability to get free rerolls, essentially. So Intervention, reroll all dice you just rolled. Can be kind of useful. Intervention actually might be an awesome ability to get. Just throw that on people. I think you're limited. It's the limit is 1. But throwing that on somebody and having it carry over and then just getting free rerolls, not too shabby. Fervor, deal magic damage equal to your total armor value, and then heal an ally with an SOI equal to half the amount of damage you dealt. If the target you heal is already at full hit points, they gain a barrier instead. Nice, but the damage is low, so I don't exactly like it. From the Grave is essentially a once per encounter res. That can be helpful. Paradigm Assault, when you hit with an attack, an ally with an SOI gains haste, barrier, or courage. So, kind of useful. Proof of Divinity, an ally with an SOI gains courage. The first time each round, another ally with courage deals. So the thing about courage is it gives you one of each symbol, but if you miss, it gets discarded. It's a bit messy. But I've also been looking at Core to see if there's anything there. It's got some unique things, but I don't think I want to mess with it. It's got things like poison and stuff like that. So there's a lot of options here. A lot of options. We're definitely going Aspect with Rook, though. It's definitely his best option. One of the things is I need more people that are very mobile through difficult terrain, and Remy is, and we need someone other than Remy that can do that. Alright, so Proof of Divinity. It's either that or I start going for Intervention tokens, and then you start stacking going up to Ascension, which you increase the amount of tokens you have. You have Flight for the duration. What I like about it is, it costs stamina to do that, so never mind. Well, essentially you get Remy's ability on top of other things. You may spend intervention tokens as if they were SP, increase them out. So, it's interesting. When you hit with an attack, an ally within SOI gains haste, barrier, or courage. I think I like Paradigm Assault simply because it just kind of stacks with what I'm already doing. But I'm kind of also just... Eventually we want someone else with Mend, because I need heals. And I do like the ability that... I haven't tried From the Grave yet. It can be useful if there's ever a situation where you just accidentally get somebody killed. God, there's just so many choices. Paradigm Assault. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'll go for. And I'm kind of running out of time. So I think I'm going to go ahead and I'll call this a video. When we come back, I'll see what we're going to do for shopping. So I'm The Depressed Eeyore, and this was Middara. I'll see you guys in a bit.